You're listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life, the podcast for accomplished professionals who want to identify what's next in their career and make it happen without compromising what matters most. I'm your host, Randi Roberts, an executive and career life coach, and I'm glad you're here. If you want to feel more energized about your work again, this show is for you. So let's get into it. Hi, this is part of a series of a few episodes where I discuss several pillars with actual clients, what the pillars mean to them, how they scored themselves, and what steps they can take to close any gaps that they find in their career satisfaction. My guest today is Sharon. She found herself particularly low on the pillars of connections and challenge, and it actually led her to change jobs. Not all gaps are so big that they require a job change, but in her case, she recognized that that's what was needed. Self-awareness was really key to Sharon figuring out what she needed and what was missing, and the career satisfaction assessment gave her a framework to explore that. So join us for the conversation. Okay, so the pillars that we're going to talk about today, Sharon, include connections and challenge. And you selected those two as important to you, so I'm excited to dig into them a little bit. Going through the assessment, what I'm going to ask you to do is sort of pick a number between 1 and 10 on where you see yourself on those two levels. But first, let's talk for a moment about what do they mean to you? And you know, we can share some ideas around that. So let's start with connections. What does that mean to you? Why was it important? Why was it compelling for you to choose it?
Well, I think about just, you know, when I think about what my strengths are and where I tend to excel, it really is around relationships. And for me, career-wise, first of all, I loved the assessment. I loved what it made me think about where I am really from different perspectives. And I thought it was fantastic, Randi. So I loved it. But when I think about connections, so it's what drives me, the relationship. I love the story. I love the story behind the person. And when I think about being in the pharma industry as long as I have been, the connections come on so many different levels. And, you know, connections can come with your customers, both, you know, I mean, and there's so many different customers that we come across. So the customer at every level, at every single level has always been really important to me. And then your peers can be really important. I mean, obviously are very important. And the connection there is, to me, to have a fulfilling career and to be happy, I have to be connected with the people that I'm around, and not on a superficial level, but I really do tend to connect at more of a deeper level, both, again, with my peers, with my customers, and with all the folks in between. So it makes it more fulfilling to me when I feel connected, when I know the why behind the person, you know, when I know maybe a little bit about what they're walking through, or a little about where they've been and where they want to go. And yeah, that's always been important to me.
Great.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And you know, you and I have known each other for a while, and it's one of the things I wasn't surprised when you chose connections to talk about, because that's not just important in your work. That's important in your life, in who you are.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Okay.
I genuinely enjoy the connection, even when the connection, say, maybe isn't naturally there at first, or takes a long time to really establish and become rooted. That's even still, I enjoy that as well. So
somehow I think that'll take us into the next pillar we're going to discuss, which is challenge.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah, look at that segue. How about that?
Great. That's great. Okay, so on connections, knowing that is so just part of who you are. That's the air you breathe.
Mm-hmm.
How would you assess your level of career satisfaction now on that pillar of connection. And again, the scale is 1 to 10. 1 is completely dissatisfied and 10 is practically perfect.
Yeah. So I'll take a step back for a minute and talk about prior to my current position. I was probably a 0. Wow. I don't even know that I was registering on the scale. And there were a lot of different reasons for that. It really was not necessarily the culture, Randi, that had a little bit to do with it, but it was also just the time that we were in with COVID. Yeah. And the position that I was in just wasn't viable to, everything was virtual. So it's hard. You can make the connection virtually. For you and I, it's very natural to be connected here on a Zoom because we know each other. Mm-hmm. But when you don't know someone, it's hard to really feel what they're about. So it was hard for me with peers, and it was extremely hard at the customer level as well. And it affected me tremendously. I did not plan to make a move, but when the opportunity arose and I looked at what it could be with the company that I'm with now, it made it worth it for me, even though it wasn't really what had been on my plan.
Okay.
So I was willing to pivot, and it had a lot to do with that.
That makes a lot of sense. If it's one of your most important pillars and it's at a 0, that's not sustainable. Yeah. So that makes a huge amount of sense.
Yeah. Where I am currently, it's only been months, but I would say already some of the connections that I've made have truly been phenomenal. And in the space that I'm in now, you really have that opportunity because you're talking about critical patients and things like that. So the connectedness, I would say, I expect this number to go higher, but I'm probably easily a 6.5 or a 7 now.
Wow. What a huge difference from a few months ago.
Huge. And I can't tell you the effect that it has had on me personally.
Tell me about that. What difference is that making for your life? Because you had to take dramatic action, I'll call it. Changing a company is a big action. Yeah. In order to make that happen, but you've done it. So what difference does that make in your life?
I'm happier. I mean, that's the bottom line. Again, because the connection is so important and it's around a really important topic, I find incredible satisfaction from that. And I can come home and think, you know what, it might be little, but today I made a difference through a connection that I established. Yeah. And I do believe that because of, again, where my strengths lie and my core, it's fairly easy for me to make connections. I think, again, because of my core and where I am, but also because I allow myself to be so vulnerable. I have absolutely no problem, and maybe it's because I do have a little bit of rear view mirror, but I have no problem going in and, meeting with folks and letting them know just how new I am and a little bit about my background with, blending my stay-at-home time as a mother and now back in corporate America, which, I don't know if I'm saying it properly, but all of that has changed and I've been able to enjoy that again. And it's like I'm breathing again. Wow. My husband sees a difference. My kids see a difference. It's incredible, the change. And again, in just such a short time.
That's wonderful. I mean, what you tie beautifully into the title of the podcast, Fulfilling Career Happy Life. It doesn't surprise me knowing you, Sharon, because you are one of the most authentic people I know. And it's delightful to see you in a more satisfying situation. That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. It is. And I think, Randi, I don't know that I knew how deeply it was affecting me prior.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure that I knew or was facing how deeply it was affecting me.
Sometimes it's much easier to get in touch with that when it stops.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that aha where, whoa, wait a minute. I'm a little bit back to myself, aren't I? I was gone for a little while, but here I am. I'm back. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It's interesting because connections is so deeply important to you in this way. Some of the discussions that I have with clients are, they may go more to connections as networking and connecting with leadership and opportunities to get ahead and things like that. And it just goes to show how this one pillar is so personal and why the discussion about why is it important to you is so meaningful. You might define it entirely differently than somebody else. Neither is right or wrong. It's what's right for you. So I appreciate this conversation so much.
Right. Yeah. And to me, that's so interesting because that came up early in my relaunch of my career. When you and I worked together a long time ago, it wasn't set up a connect, find a mentor. It was, who do you sort of jive with, and develop a relationship there and see where it leads, because it will certainly lead somewhere good. And so it's been interesting for me to now have to look at it totally differently. And it's the same thing though, right? It's connectedness.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Are you saying that now you feel you have to just be more purposeful about it?
Yes. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. And so that's a good thing for people to be aware of, because maybe, especially in remote working arrangements and things like that, maybe it doesn't happen as organically, but it can still happen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly. And those were the words I used when it was suggested that I reach out and make a connect on the calendar with, such and such and this other person. And I said, that's not necessarily comfortable for me. I like it to happen organically, and I want to have a reason to reach out other than, to me, it almost felt as though, hey, hi, I'm Sharon. Let's talk about how you can help me in my career. Yeah. And I know that was not what was meant.
Yeah.
But so interesting. It was just an interesting observation for me early on. Again, like I said, when I relaunched.
Very interesting. And what I find a lot of times is we do that to ourselves. We hold ourselves back. Wonderful. So you've taken huge leaps. You've gone from a 0 on connections to like a 6.5, 7, I think you said. And I'm even hearing optimism that it might go higher than that.
I believe it will. I really do, because that's been in a really a pretty short amount of time. Again, a lot of different things have changed that I, won't get into. But the bottom line is this pillar as, a huge leap forward. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for sharing all that, Sharon. I appreciate it. Let's switch gears and let's talk about challenge, which we've already found a few ties there, but is in many ways feels very different than connections.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a moment. Why did you gravitate towards that pillar to talk about today, and what does that mean to you?
When I think about why I gravitated toward that pillar, I have always been of the mindset that if you're not learning, if you're not growing, if you're not being curious, and you're not seeking out information, education, opportunities, whatever it is, then you kind of become stagnant. That's for me. And those things all present challenges in different ways. So if I'm stagnant, I'm not going to be as happy. If I'm challenging myself to do things, maybe to look at things differently, to do things better, to make sure that I'm as well prepared in whatever it is that I'm doing as I can be, then I'm going to be more content and happier. Does that make sense?
It makes a whole lot of sense. It makes a whole lot of sense. And so I understand what it means to you in terms of keeping yourself growing and keeping yourself in motion, maybe, leaning forward. I heard those kinds of things. So having said that, where would you assess yourself on this scale of 1 to 10? 10's practically perfect and 1 is completely dissatisfied.
So we'll do it again the same way, right? I'll go back to the company that I was with.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful to look at it that way.
Yeah. There were definitely still a lot of, it was such a great company, and they did a lot to make sure that while the landscape had changed so drastically, that there were other opportunities for all employees to challenge themselves through learning courses and things like that. And I was able to take advantage of that. What I wasn't able to do was really, in my role, be more challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't, again, it was such unprecedented times. So I would say, it was a much larger company, but I would say probably a 4 or 5, and probably now at a smaller company, I do see more agility, more ability to, hey, if you have a great idea, take a look at it, develop it, bring it forward. And yeah, it may very well be that we can implement. And so that allows a little more freedom and to pursue the challenge.
Got it.
So probably from a 4 to a 5, and now 5 to a 6.
Okay.
How's that for gray, Randy?
That sounds real, is how it sounds.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, with challenge, do you ever get to a 10?
Well, it's an interesting question, because keep in mind that each number is almost like a ratio of what do you need and how much are you getting.
Yeah.
So there are people that need tons of challenge. Like I've gone through periods in my career and seen clients now going like they need a ton of challenge. And if they're getting a ton of challenge, which may be way too much for some people, like they're close to a 10. But if they're in a season in their career or their life, or even just a moment where they need to restore and reset,
yeah,
and the level of challenge is so extreme, it might be the very same challenge, but because something in them has changed, at least for the moment, their score will drop way, way down. So it's always a ratio, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I looked at challenge. I thought about that. And I was like, so for me, connections will always improve outcomes in my performance. I do believe that.
Right.
Challenge should, but not necessarily always, because I can challenge myself in completely the wrong area and go way off course.
Way off course in terms of like your job lane, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Or something that I think, is in my job lane, but is it just that it's a great challenge? And so I'm going to kind of push it into my job lanes a little bit.
And so maybe it's a little bit of a shiny object.
Perhaps.
But sometimes, like, it depends on the environment you're in. That can lead to a new business opportunity, or, if it's, and certainly, obviously, in your field, if it's compliant and those kinds
Absolutely.
of things.
Right.
No, it makes sense. It's, sometimes the accidents or the opportunities can take us to some really interesting places.
For sure.
Good. Okay. So it sounds like for challenge, you're making some steps. Maybe there's even a little more opportunity to improve the score, whether that means how much of it you need or how much of it you're getting. Is that a priority for you to work on bringing that score up? Or is it, given that you're new on your job, maybe it's just happening naturally?
I think it's happening. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it's happening naturally. If, say, things were different and I was at a 5 or maybe a 6, then it would probably be, okay, Sharon, you need to focus. You need to think about what you're doing and what you need to be doing, and find I don't want to say the next thing, but find whatever it is that is going to push you a little bit forward now.
So Sharon, any other thoughts based on our discussion? Anything coming to mind for you that you?
Well, I think, and I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but I think in looking at this, Randi, at this, at the pillars and the assessment, it really made me realize that I do need to be deliberate and very mindful and disciplined around looking at the whole picture. I can't be all connections. That's not going to work in business. It can be one of my core values, but, and I like that. So I appreciate that. And I'm grateful to you. Thank you. Because that's what will make it more holistic, right? And more balanced and more successful.
It's a really interesting point, because connections is one that we talked about is just inherent to who you are. And it's one of your great talents, but connections take that too far could prevent business results. Even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we work within a framework as well. Yes. So that's an important point.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts here on these pillars, and also providing a really important example for sometimes it is a big change is required to dial yourself up enough on the pillars that are most important to you if the gaps are so big. But other times it's not such dramatic action, I'll call it, as changing jobs. There are shifts you can make within your own job. So, I would encourage you give it a little time on the new job and then maybe take another look at it and see, because it's not going to require such a big change next time since you've already closed so many gaps. It's wonderful.
Right. Yeah. I'm excited. I think there's a lot of opportunity and truly, I downloaded the assessment and I will, I'll refer back to those pillars because I think you hit it right on there.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and I wish you all the best in your new job.
Thank you, Randi. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.